Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and this time we've got the pleasure of watching ProofeG playing in the brand new Tier 10 Chinese heavy tank. It is the WZ-111 5A. Now, hopefully you've watched my full preview on this vehicle, but for those of you who haven't, let me try and get you up to date as quickly as possible. This vehicle is fairly similar to the 113, i.e. a Tier 10 Chinese heavy tank. The key differences are the alpha damage on this gun is higher. It uses 130mm instead of 122mm, so a lot like the IS-7 or, for example, the Mouse, you've got 490 alpha damage and kind of the same characteristics with regards to penetration. One thing I would love to highlight here is that this is not the standard ammunition on the tank. Proof has put his high explosive anti-tank rounds on his one key, so he is firing, I guess these shells do cost him probably about 5,400 credits. Let me just check exactly. They're 4,800 credits a shell. So this is going to be an expensive round if he fires all 28 of those 130mm premium rounds. But other differences between the vehicles, this tank has actually got more gun depression, at least over the front of the tank. The 113 has just had its gun depression buffed, I guess, for the second time. Originally, I believe the 113 had about 3 degrees of gun depression. Then it was 5, and now it is 7, but only 7 over the side of the vehicle. You still only have 5 degrees over the front. The 111 5A, on the other hand, has 7 degrees pretty much all round apart from directly over the back of the tank, which makes this vehicle feel very flexible on ridge lines. It truly feels more like a heavy medium or a medium heavy, but it still has that full-blown heavy tank alpha damage of 490, right? And even though Proof is firing heat here at the Panzer 7, it looks like they're doing exactly the same. Gosh, the Russian server Tier 10, is it premium or get out? I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes on throughout this replay. So other things that are different between the 111 5A and the 113. This vehicle's turret armor isn't quite as good. And also the upper hull on this vehicle, if you angle it like this, it does have quite a few weak points on the inside because, as you can see, it's got a bit of a pike nose in here. And whenever you turn a vehicle with a pike nose to the side, it does become quite a lot weaker. The 113 is just this big old slope on the front of the tank, and so angling it can make it very effective as long as you don't overexpose your side armor. However, the lower plate on this tank is absolutely awesome. It is way thicker than the 113, and if you angle it, you've got pretty much about 220mm of effective lower plate armor. That's something the 113 can only dream of. And so that means that the 111 5A kind of does a lot better against vehicles that are 2 tiers lower than it when it's just sitting completely out in the open. It'll be harder for those medium tanks to pen your lower plate. But of course, you do run the risk of having a slightly weaker turret and also a weaker upper plate, especially when you angle it to the sides. Now, other great things, well, what does the 113 and the 111 5A specialize in? And not a lot of people have the Tier 10 Chinese heavy tanks. And I think that that's something that's probably going to change with the release of this vehicle. And especially now that the 113 is in a better position than ever. And it has one of the best win ratios in the game out of all of the Tier 10 heavies. It is a vehicle that a lot of people pick both in the esport game mode and also if you're running your skirmishes, your advances, strongholds, tank companies. What do they even call them these days? I don't even know. Probably a variety of things. Now, the Chinese heavy tanks specialize not with their gigantic, thick frontal armor, a lot like you will have on the E100 there. It's a lot thinner, but it's still well angled, a lot like on some of the medium tanks, like the Object 430, for example, with 120mm of upper hull armor on that vehicle. Now, this is thicker. We're talking about 140 here on this tank, but still, you get the idea that you're sacrificing super heavy armor to be able to gain increased mobility and also, I must stress, a lot of hit points. This vehicle has got 2,200 hit points. A lot of the super heavies are now packing, well, with the Mouse, 3,200, right? Well, that's actually a good point. They might be trying to reduce that soon. But even a vehicle like the E100 that we see there has got 2,700 hit points. So you've got 25% less hit points on a vehicle like the 111 5A. But of course, you gain the mobility. This vehicle is rather fast indeed, 50 kilometers an hour, a decent power to weight ratio. It's just a much more medium-esque vehicle, but still has the armor that will be effective against, should we say, non-super heavy penetration guns, or super high penetration guns would probably be a more accurate description. So now ProofeG is right behind this mouse, and that's exactly where you want to be when it comes to this tier 10 super heavy. And it looks like, I guess he thinks that this round might be getting a little bit expensive for him because he double taps the 2 key, but instead of loading gold, he is loading his standard ammunition here, the armor piercing rounds. But the penetration on this gun isn't even that bad with the standard rounds. We're talking about 250, and that's enough to not even really have to aim at the 907. And talking about it, that's one of the key things that I totally forgot to mention about the differences between the 111 5A and the 113. And that is that this vehicle has got 2.5 seconds aim time. It might be slightly less accurate at 0.39. That's still not terrible, at least. But this vehicle's aim time is absolutely incredible. It's also its dispersion values when it's turning the tank, moving the vehicle and turning the turret aren't all that bad. And so when I was playing this tank on the test server, that 7 degrees of gun depression combined with the aim time and the still darn decent rate of fire that you get with the Chinese heavy tanks, which is pretty much about 10-20% higher than all of the other heavy vehicles at tier 10, just feels absolutely incredible. And I must highlight that the only other tank that really gives these kind of vehicles a run for the money will be the FV215B, or alternatively, if you want to have an autoloader, a T57 Heavy. So now Proof is locked in combat with an Object 907 here, and he's decided that he needs to get out of that alleyway because there are 2 tier 10 tank destroyers that were last spotted down there. Now he's making his way across the corner here. Hopefully the Object 268 won't turn right and shoot him in the side, and that gives him an opportunity to finish off the Object 907 and now wedge his tank in this absolute graveyard of both his team and the enemy team. Now it's neck and neck here, 3 tanks aside, but we're going to have to see how long that FV215B, which is a one-shot, lasts against the T10 and oh gosh, Jagdpanzer E100 comes around the corner. Now this is where the premium ammunition on this vehicle with 340mm of penetration really does come in handy. That super heavy German tank destroyer superstructure, or for example the lower plate here, does hold up very well to standard ammunition, but not very well to heat rounds, which don't lose any penetration over distance and have higher penetration to boot. So Proof's team now melts. The Object 268 catching the Object 140 and the T10E4 taking out the FV215B on the hill. But thankfully the Jagdpanzer E100 doesn't believe in stopping when shooting and whiffs his shell, which allows Proof to put one more into him. Now the Object 268 advancing towards him on 668 hit points. He bounces his shell, I believe, off the upper plate there and decides to ram him. Now he does do he takes a little bit of damage from the Object 268, but doesn't actually do any in return. And the Jagdpanzer E100 doesn't aim, bounces a shell off the turret. What is going on here? Are they trying to squish him? Will Proof... The Object 268 misses again. Will Proof now be able to reload before the Jagdpanzer finishes him off? He's on 711 hit points. He finds the upper plate of the 268, shutting him down. Will the Jaeger do reload? He gets up close and personal. The Jagdpanzer pushing in. The T10E4 misses behind him. The Jagdpanzer E100 fails to damage Proof, and now he's putting rounds through his upper plate. Just what is going on with these tier 10 tank destroyers on the Russian server? Proof now has to get away from the Jagdpanzer and the T10E4. He puts one through the cheeks there, and surely this is the end. Surely this is the end of Proof in this replay. No, the T10E4 misses again, and Proof gets a momentary respite to be able to compose himself and re-engage these tier 10 tank destroyers. Who's he going to go for first, the Jagdpanzer E100 or the T10E4? Right through the lower plate of the Jagdpanzer E100. The Jaeger misses again. I think these guys might be having a pretty darn good weekend, or a pretty darn good midweek. I think a few bottles of vodka were consumed, dispensed amongst these players alone. How is Proof still alive here? And he is running rings around the T10E4. He puts one into the side, escapes again, but the T10E4 isn't the slowest of tier 10 tank destroyers, and with a turret he might have the flexibility to be able to catch Proof unless he manages to get some distance away from him. A quick look behind, the T10E4 didn't decide to come around the corner, and now the enemy team is playing carefully. But the reason why Proof is still in this game is twofold. One, the mobility of the tank. I guess, well, maybe threefold. Two, the low-profile nature and fairly troll armor of the vehicle. It's not exactly perfect, but when your opponents don't bother to even aim at it, you can do darn well. And also, the mobility, the fact that he's been able to control the engagement and to get away from the T10E4. Now, interestingly enough, Proof has run out of premium rounds. Oh, He is so lucky to not die there. He was on, what, 647 hit points, and the average damage of that 155mm caliber gun is 750. Proof should be dead. But he's nearly dispensed all of the ammunition in this tank. Absolutely crazy stuff here. Oh, he fires another one into the dirt there, or into the rubble. And the T10 this time bounces off his turret. He's on 35 hit points. The T10 surely should load a high explosive round to be able to finish him off here. And he realizes, why not aim at the back of the tank? The armor there is completely thin, and he will be able to go through it. 431 damage, certainly not the highest roll, but now he is down to 4 high explosive rounds. But even one of those into the top of the T10, which is very lightly armored, will be enough for Proof to take down this absolute neck and neck game. It was a nail biter at the end here, and I honestly cannot believe he managed to get through this one, picking up nearly 11,500 damage. So Proof, if you're watching this, I thoroughly recommend you go and buy yourself a lottery ticket, but then again, maybe not, because I think you used up all of your luck, at least for the next few years in this game of World of Tanks. He picks up a Spartan's medal for ricocheting around with less than 10% of his hit points, a steel wall medal for blocking 5,530 damage, and also a high caliber for 11,429 damage. Not bad for a tank that's only been out for a couple of days, right? But I must highlight that Proof did go a little bit wild on the gold ammunition here. 144,000 credits spent, and even when he's dealt 11,500 damage to the enemy team, he loses 41,000 credits. But for picking up his ace tanker in the first couple of days that this vehicle has been released, he probably doesn't even give a darn. So ProofeG, congratulations to you, and thank you so much for uploading this on whatreplays.ru. I really hope you don't mind me sharing this with the English-speaking community. I was looking for great WZ-111 5A replays, and when I saw the ending of this game, I didn't have to look any further. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. I'd really appreciate it, and let me know in the comments what you think about the WZ-111 5A. Have you managed to see any of them in your battles at the high tiers? Have they been on your team? Have they been on the enemy team? Have they been doing really well? And have you managed to pick one up yet? And if so, what do you think about him? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.